You're standing in an open field at midday, and the sun starts to die. Not sunset. Not clouds. The sky is clear, the sun is directly overhead, and a shadow is eating it from one edge, slowly, silently, with no sound and no warning. The temperature drops. The birds around you go quiet, then frantic, then quiet again. A strange, wrong-colored twilight spreads across the ground, the kind of light that doesn't belong to any time of day you've ever seen. And then, for a few unbearable minutes, the sun is gone, not clouded over. Gone. A black hole where the source of all light and warmth and life used to be, ringed by a pale, ghostly fire that shouldn't exist. You know exactly what this is. You've seen the diagrams. You know the moon is passing in front of the sun. You know it'll be over in minutes. You might even have a pair of glasses in your bag for the occasion. Strip all of that away, and you're left with what nearly every human being for the first 300,000 years of our species had to face this moment with: nothing. No explanation. No warning. Just the absolute physical sensation that the sun, the single thing every living thing on Earth depends on, is being killed in front of you. And here's the detail that makes this so much worse than it sounds. A total solar eclipse only returns to roughly the same spot on Earth once every 375 years, on average. Most people, in most places, throughout most of human history, would see this happen exactly once in their entire life, if they were lucky enough to see it at all. There was no oral tradition passed down that said, "Don't worry, this happens sometimes." Every single eclipse, for most communities, was a first-time event, which means every single culture on Earth, independently, with no contact with each other, had to answer the same terrifying question from scratch. What is eating the sun, and how do we make it stop? In China, the answer was a dragon. A sun-eating dragon, tearing into the sky itself, and the only defense anyone had was noise. Villages would erupt in a coordinated panic, banging drums, smashing pots, shooting arrows straight up into the sky, trying to frighten the beast into letting go. Oracle bones from the Shang dynasty, more than 3,000 years old, record the event in 4 blunt words: the sun has been eaten. As the story goes, one emperor's royal astronomers once failed to predict an eclipse in time, leaving the empire unprepared to scare the dragon off, and paid for that failure with their lives. What's stranger is that centuries later, Chinese astronomers had already worked out the actual mechanics. They knew exactly when an eclipse was coming, down to the day. And they kept ordering the drums and the noise anyway. Not because they still believed in the dragon, but because the ritual had become the point. The emperor needed to be seen saving the sun. In Mesopotamia, the fear went straight to the throne. Assyrian and Babylonian priests believed a solar eclipse could be a death sentence aimed directly at the king, an omen written across the sky. So they built an escape hatch. It was called the substitute king ritual. When the omens turned dark enough, the real king would vanish into hiding, and a stand-in, sometimes a prisoner, sometimes someone of no importance, would be dressed in royal robes and placed on the throne to absorb whatever fate the heavens had planned. He'd rule for real, briefly, with real ceremony. And then, when the danger was considered to have passed, he was killed, and the actual king walked back out and resumed his life as if nothing happened. This wasn't myth. There are more than 30 separate written records of it, and at least one substitute, a young man named Damki, is named directly in the historical record as having been put to death this way in the 7th century BC. An entire empire built and executed a fake monarchy over and over again because they were that afraid of what a darkened sun meant for the man who ran the kingdom. Across the ocean, in the heart of the Aztec Empire, the sky itself was under attack from monsters. The Tzitzimima, skeletal star demons associated with the stars visible around a blacked-out sun, were believed to descend during an eclipse with the intention of devouring humanity outright. This wasn't a minor superstition, it shaped behavior in the moment. Pregnant women were told to keep an obsidian blade pressed against their bodies for protection, out of fear the eclipse would deform the child growing inside them. Children were sometimes masked, so that if the world genuinely ended in that moment, they wouldn't be recognized and taken. This is recorded directly in the Florentine Codex, compiled from Aztec informants themselves, not outside guesswork. Notice what's happening here. 3 civilizations, separated by oceans and thousands of miles, none of them in contact with each other, and all 3 arrived at some version of the same nightmare. Something is devouring the sun, and it wants us next. Hindu tradition tells a version of this too, a demon named Rahu swallowing the sun. The noise-making in particular shows up again and again in completely unrelated cultures, banging on anything that makes sound, as if scaring off a predator. That's not coincidence. That's what it looks like when the human brain, everywhere on Earth, is handed the same terrifying stimulus and forced to invent meaning on the spot. But there's one moment in this story where fear briefly lost and reasoning won. In 585 BC, two armies, the Lydians and the Medes, were in the sixth year of a brutal, exhausting war, locked in battle, when the sky went dark in the middle of the fight. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, writing more than a century later, the philosopher Thales of Miletus had predicted this exact eclipse in advance. Whether he actually had the ability to calculate it, or simply got lucky and the story grew in the retelling, is something historians still argue about today, since the astronomy required would have been extraordinarily advanced for his time. What's not disputed is what happened next. Both armies, terrified by the sudden darkness, dropped their weapons on the spot and negotiated peace. A war that noise and fear had failed to end for 6 years, ended in minutes because of a shadow crossing the sun. Here's what ties all of this together. The fear wasn't stupidity. It was the correct response to an event that looked, in every physical sense, like the end of the world happening in real time. And that fear did something remarkable. It made watching the sky one of the highest stakes activities a civilization could engage in. Get the prediction wrong, and astronomers lost their heads. Fail to warn the king, and an empire could fall into chaos. So people watched, generation after generation, recording every pattern, every cycle, every warning sign, not out of curiosity, but out of sheer dread. That obsessive, terrified record-keeping is part of what built some of the earliest mathematical astronomy on Earth. The dragon, the demons, the substitute king, all of it fed directly into humanity's first real attempts to predict the sky with precision. So the next time a shadow crosses the sun and you calmly put on a pair of paper glasses to watch, understand what you're standing on top of. Thousands of years of your ancestors, in every corner of the world, watching the same event and genuinely believing it might be the last thing they ever saw.